Good afternoon. Haiti Oropesa with Florida You Judge, and we're getting ready to start. I have as an invited guest attorney Craig Whisenhunt, and he is one of the attorneys, owners of Ripley and Whisenhunt, and you've probably heard about him in the news recently. He is one of several plaintiffs who sued Governor DeSantis after Governor DeSantis signed an executive order, prohibiting school districts from imposing a mask mandate. And so he's going to be on for as long as we're on. This is going to hopefully be very informative. Craig is brilliant. I've seen him interacting online, and also am knowledgeable about his work legally as a criminal defense attorney. And he's amazing with in regards to IT issues. And so welcome, Craig, and thank you for being with me this afternoon.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me on.
If you all want to call 813-221-9700, we're going to be taking live calls so that you can directly speak to Craig, ask him any questions regarding this case. So Friday, I remember I was waiting. I know you and several plaintiffs challenged the governor of this state. I know I've read several articles to be prepared for this afternoon's conversation with you. And the New York Times stated in one of an article that was published on Thursday that, and I'm going to read directly from their article, more children in the state are hospitalized with COVID-19 than at any other point during this pandemic that's been ongoing now for 17 to 18 months. This week, they go on to say in Orange County, where Orlando is, children between the ages of 5 and 14 made up about 20% of new virus cases. And it's affecting them, from my understanding, based on what I've read, more seriously than the initial COVID virus. Is that true? And if that's true, what we're reading, why would DeSantis, when the CDC is recommending, even for persons that are vaccinated in certain instances, to wear masks, why is he going against decisions of the school districts who are saying, no, this is necessary for their safety and that of other staff, teachers? What's going on, Craig? What happened? What just happened? What did we all witness?
Well, I think there's probably a few things there to unpack.
Okay.
So the first thing is, yes, Florida is leading the country right now. Our numbers are skyrocketing. We're more or less out of control, especially in certain population dense parts of the state. And there's really no getting around that. And it's also very true that we're seeing the virus spreading through a younger population than what the earlier variants and wild form of the virus had done. Which is also why it was so important that school boards be able to take whatever measures that they felt they should for their community to protect not only the students, but of course our teachers, the family members, the staff of these schools. While it remains true that for the most part, children are seemingly less affected in the near term, we don't know the long-term consequences yet, but what we do know is most students go home to adults, and adults are still very much having susceptibility to this virus. And so the CDC is, as an agency, its job is to promulgate, guidelines and recommendations. The state of Florida adheres to the CDC and dozens of other matters. I honestly couldn't tell you what the governor's thought process may have been as to why to abandon reliance on that in this instance, but it certainly seems to fly in the face of common sense and science to do so.
So he goes ahead and he says, and he references a new law, and you can enlighten me and those who are watching and will watch, a new law that legislatively came down in favor of parental rights and the parents' right to, on behalf of their children, make decisions educationally and for their health. And so, I've been going through all these articles and reading this, and I'm seeing it like it's almost weird to see he's saying this is parents' right, but then the school districts are saying it's children's rights too. It's like, how is there an adversarial conflict between parents who we're presuming want the best for their children?
Well, I think it's important to remember that within our state, we have entire chapters of our laws devoted to the reality that unfortunately, parents don't always do right by their children. Children don't always behave the way parents would expect them to. And that's not always even a reflection on mom and dad or grandma or whomever. Kids can be kids. There comes a point, though, where individual rights, individual autonomy have to give just a little bit to make way for public health overall. And we see that constantly. Our schools require inoculations for highly contagious and potentially deadly diseases. If you want to enroll your child into a public school in Florida, they have to be vaccinated against things like the measles. And that seems like a much more substantial healthcare decision than putting on a mask would be. But I think the pushback here has been there's so much we don't know yet about the coronavirus, and that's true all the way up to the best experts and minds in the country. There's a lot of unknowns about this, and when you talk to experts, good ones, candid ones, they'll admit that there's a lot they do not know, which I think sometimes betrays how much they really do. So you end up with a small faction of people who jump on this momentary, oh, they're admitting they don't know that much about it, or they don't know everything about it, and we shouldn't be relying on them because they might be steering us the wrong way. Scientists, good scientists, are pretty open about the limitations of what they know. They're steadfast about the need to evolve their view and position on something as they learn more, which is what you would hope from them, which is why we've seen evolving guidance. Um, we knew at the onset of this we were dealing with something we hadn't before, and it's going to take and continue to take an evolving view to get through it.
So DeSantis says the school districts, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can go ahead and do a mask mandate. You just have to give a parental opt out.
Right.
Am I correct on that?
Right. So the executive order that Governor DeSantis issued essentially did very, very little. It told the Department of Health and Department of Education that they had to respect the constitutional rights and laws of the state of Florida, which would have been true whether he'd written those sentences or not. That's always the rule. As best we know, the governor's not running around issuing a lot of executive orders directing people not to follow the law. But very specifically, he had put into this executive order that they needed to more or less adhere to the Parents' Bill of Rights. And then he went a step further and said that within the scope of the Parents' Bill of Rights, parents retained the sole decision about whether or not to mask their children. And so that any masking policy put in place by any school district would be required to have a mandatory voluntary parental opt-out. Now, I think it's really important here to understand why that specifically is a problem, because there's a lot of confusion about that issue. Very frequently, I see parents, people who are hesitant with a lot of the science, insisting, you know what, hey, if you believe in all this, put your kid in a mask, right? No one's stopping you from sending your kid to school in a mask. The science behind this, and in fact, the study that the governor himself heavily relied upon, and his only expert, he called it the trial, Dr. Bhattacharya, who is an economist who happens to have a medical degree. But the study that they primarily rely upon is this Danish mask study. And that was a study conducted very, very early on when we were first encountering COVID back in the spring of 2020, at a time in Denmark when the positivity rate was around 2%, when there were no mask requirements whatsoever. They took a fairly small sample size of around 6,000 people, divide them in half, 3,000 of whom were supposed to wear masks in public. The other 3,000 wouldn't. And at the end of 30 days, they looked to see, well, how many of the mask wearers caught COVID compared to the ones who didn't wear masks. Now, it's also worth noting that that was a self-reported study, and only about 46% of the participants reported that they had actually complied with the instructions that they had been given. So right off the bat, this is not what you want to put a whole lot of faith and stock into. But what they found at that point was that wearing the mask didn't offer much protection to the wearer, that the positivity rate for those wearing the masks and not um, wasn't that far apart. It was about an 18 to 28% decline, which is not insignificant, but the study was looking for a 50% reduction or more to be statistically relevant. So what they ultimately concluded, though, was masks don't seem to offer necessarily a ton of protection to the wearer. But, and this is a big part of the study that the governor seems to have um, selectively ignored, or perhaps nobody bothered to give him this part of the cliff notes. But it says that it should not be interpreted to mean that wearing masks could not limit the spread, particularly in environments where masks were used more uniformly. And when we're talking about in a classroom where everyone is wearing a mask, that's why it's important. Because the points of potential infection, where you can basically be exposed to the virus and then become sick, are not limited to your mouth and your nose. In fact, one of the high points of contraction appears to be people rubbing their eyes. The eyes become a very effective point for the virus to kind of enter into the body and take hold. So the goal is, the mask obviously doesn't protect eyes. Those of us who wear glasses may have marginal benefits there. But the goal is to keep the amount of the virus in the environment as low as you can. And that comes from reducing the amount of particulate in the air and the amount of particulate that's resting on surfaces, which is why cleaning surfaces is so important. It's why washing your hands is so important. There's a lot of important parts, but the mask traps a considerable amount of the virus that would be otherwise expelled simply by speaking. It's not 100%. Even an N95 mask is not going to be 100%. But if you were faced with jumping out of an airplane, would you rather no parachute at all
Right.
or a parachute with some holes in it? And I think most people would say, you know what, anything's better than nothing.
Right.
And the same is true here. So the studies that the governor relied upon, that his own defense team put into evidence in our trial, really disprove his theory of how this virus works and what the science about it is, which is something that Judge Cooper made very specific note of in his ruling, of how much of his ruling was entirely reliant upon the evidence that the defense entered.
And Craig, why is that? Has he submitted his written order yet? Because
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
So why do you? Okay, so did he ultimately, and correct me if I'm wrong, he went with the CDC? Yes, on that.
Somewhat. So he,
Okay,
in the extent of Judge Cooper's order, and he offered a tremendously lengthy recitation of the facts of the case that, as he understood them to be, as the trier of fact, based upon the weight of the evidence and all of the factors that go into weighing and evaluating the quality of evidence. He gave a very lengthy recitation and very plainly said, the consensus view, not the unanimous view, but the consensus view really is that masks are a reasonable part of preventative strategies, multi-layered preventative strategies. And so he acknowledged that, but he's not mandating that people wear masks or even offering a value assessment of whether or not they should or what school districts ought to do. Ultimately, what this case came down to was so much simpler than that. And that is that within the Parents' Bill of Rights, it says that the rights of parents should be protected and should not be infringed upon unless there's a compelling government interest, that the solution is narrowly tailored to meet that interest and is the least restrictive means. And so within the Parents' Bill of Rights itself, it gives governments at all levels the authority to invade the rights reserved to parents if.
right.
And in this instance, if is we got to keep children alive, we have to keep schools open, and this is the path forward to do that.
Okay, if you have any questions for Craig, you can call in at 813-221-9700 or comment in the comments section, and we'll read your questions, comments. So and I know that he also made mention, because they kept citing to the new law to stress you're going against parent, or this is about parents' rights. And so that was good that you focused in on, pointed out the fact that he's not ruling against parents' rights. He's just, like, as you just articulated, he's just saying, look, the school districts do have the ability constitutionally to enact rules when they're reasonable, and there's a compelling governmental interest that's narrowly tailored.
And not every school district is going to do it.
Right.
Not every district would need to. I mean, the reality of
Right.
it is that we're a very diverse state, and we have some truly rural communities that have remained somewhat unscathed from COVID.
Right.
Lower population density matters. And for them, it may not make as much sense. If you have a high rate of vaccination within a community, you know, you may not have as great a need, for instance, for mask mandates in high schools. But especially right now, while elementary schools are comprised of populations that largely cannot be vaccinated, it maybe makes more sense within a community to require masks in that environment. The goal here is school districts really need to be able to evolve their approach to this problem to fit their local needs. And that's the only thing that this lawsuit set out to do, and is exactly what Judge Cooper ultimately put in place.
Okay, so let me see. I think, is there a comment here? Um there's the case is not over. They're gonna appeal. What do you think about the prospect of them prevailing over the ruling that was rendered on Friday?
So the ruling from Judge Cooper, it is such a strong position under the law. I would be very hesitant to see, or be very surprised, frankly, to see it be disturbed on appeal.
Okay.
Um, it would, ironically, in order for it really to be disturbed on appeal, you would really need to see some significant judicial activism, which, of course, from a largely conservative bench like that which we have on the first DCA, is unlikely. We're strict interpretation of the law as it is written, strict, constructionist viewpoints, which I think, from a conservative leaning view, is important. It's not the job of the judiciary to read into the law that which isn't there. Um, the law here is very plain. It does not prohibit masks anywhere within that statute. It does not address public health issues anywhere in that statute. And it very specifically says that any level of government can invade the rights of parents if it's reasonable and necessary. So what should happen next is it is affirmed on appeal. I'm certain we will see litigation at the district level, school district levels, where mask mandates may be imposed, and parents may want to challenge that and say, I don't think this is reasonable. And we'll force the school boards to defend why they invaded those rights. And if the school board cannot
Right.
successfully defend that, then it shouldn't be there. But so long as the school board can defend the action, that it's meeting a necessary and reasonable government interest, and that they've narrowly tailored their efforts to achieve that, and it's the least restrictive means, the law says that is okay. And that's the law that the governor signed. That's the law that he was so proud of. That was the law that he hung his hat on to file this executive order in the first place. So I would be surprised if he'd come out and say that he thinks it's a bad law at this point. I just don't know that he likes the fact that it's being strictly adhered to.
Let's quickly talk about, because I did fail to mention what DeSantis did once the school districts that, and Bravo to Broward County, Alachua, the first two counties I believe they were, that went ahead and defied DeSantis. He says that if you defy this order, we're going to go ahead and you're going to have consequences. We're going to take monies from you. I believe the federal government stepped in and kind of, I read one article that said that they were willing to maybe make up for whatever monies any local school district lost as a result of defiance against DeSantis. But talk about that. What did Judge Cooper do as far as an injunction on, I think, yeah.
Right. So what the ruling ultimately did is it granted the relief sought by the plaintiffs to enjoin the Department of Education and the state school board from enforcing the Department of Health policy or rule that restricted school districts from imposing mask mandates without opt-outs. In other words, uh, the whole idea here from the governor's office of prohibiting mask policies without opt-outs is unenforceable. So school districts now can do it so long as they can meet that threshold. Again, that's the big factor here. It's not forever, it's not in perpetuity, it's not whatever they want. But if they can demonstrate that it's reasonable and necessary to meet that compelling interest, they're free to do what they want to do to protect their student population, how they see best to do it.
Well, we're gonna wrap up. But I do want to put up your information, Craig. And so where can the viewers, the community, the public contact you? You practice not only criminal defense, but you do constitutional law.
Correct. And a lot of what our firm does is still geared in the criminal realm. Like by and large, I love criminal defense work. It was very unusual to be on the side of protecting kids instead of representing someone who's accused of harming kids. And I want to, while I have just a moment, want to point out the legal team involved in this case was extraordinary, and the number of hours spent by everybody involved. I think we worked out if we had all been billing at our ordinary rates, we were clearing $1 million of legal effort here to defend children in Florida. And of course, none of us were paid a penny. Our experts all did it pro bono. We did it entirely pro bono. But Aaron Willems and Aaron Barnett and Josh Sheridan and the whole crew, Charles Gallagher, and I don't mean to slight anybody by leaving their names out here, but I mean, it was such an incredible group of lawyers, and we were so fortunate to be able to all work together so quickly with such little sleep to make this happen, that they deserve a wealth of credit. I largely got to do the fun part of make an argument, but there was so much behind the scenes work from them that they deserve so much credit for. But I want everybody to know that my firm primarily does criminal defense work, and we do a lot of post-conviction, wrongfully accused, actual innocence, newly discovered evidence work.
Where can they reach you? What
I have
number?
So they can go to ripleywisenhunt.com, or they can give us a phone call.
Okay, let me Ripley. Is that all? No spacing.
No spacing, just ripleywisenhunt.com. And they're more than welcome to give us a call.
We have some comments coming in, but I wanted to plug you, of course, because you're amazing. Thank you. Ripley, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if you want to reach out to Craig, you can visit his website, his law office website, ripleywisenhunt.com. And I'm sure your telephone number and all your contact information will be there. Yes?
All there. Yes.
Okay, so we have a comment from Roberta Malcolm. The governor has had a history of forcing others to take the unpopular positions in order to save his own political career. Isn't this just a continuation of that behavior? I don't know if you want to comment, react to that. I don't know.
Sure. So I will say this. I don't, for as much as I believe that the governor put forward policies that endangered our children, I do not believe he did so without some calculation of benefit for himself. And I think a lot of that can be seen from the last few days. I mean, the governor is raising money off of the ruling. He will continue to raise money as it continues to be litigated. He'll raise money when the first DCA affirms it. He'll continue to raise money even if it goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. And he'll champion the fact to his base that he was always there advocating for parents' rights. And it was, what he'll describe as liberal judges and left-leaning lawyers ruining it for them. So there's a political calculus here. I'm sure of it. But I think at the end of the day, it's hard to justify the political benefits knowing that at the end you're putting children and families in Florida in danger. And you would certainly hope better of somebody who is the governor of the state, and absolutely wish better for someone who has made it clear he has aspirations for higher office. He used his position his ability to extort school districts into compliance with the threat of funding losses that would affect all of the students um, in a manner that none of us, conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican, should be comfortable with. He really took a position here that was more indicative of what we see from dictators and monarchs and people who feel like there's no challenge to their authority. Um, that's not how democracy works. We don't all have to get along. We don't all have to agree, but we do all have to follow the law. And in this instance, the governor unavoidably, objectively violated the law. Uh, and we stood up and the court agreed and told him that he doesn't get to do that anymore.
Taylor Ward, thank you for your work on this life and death issue. Parents all over Florida are so grateful. Thank you, Taylor, for weighing in. We also have, since Judge Cooper's ruling, does Alachua County still have to submit information to Florida Department of Education regarding reporting disciplinary action towards students not wearing masks? That's 1975 Little.
So what's interesting about that is Alachua County submitted their first letter to the Department of Education regarding their disciplinary actions, as they were told they were required to, and in a tremendous way, submitted the letter with the claim of, well, since our policies aren't in violation of law, we have nothing to report, and left it at that, which, if there's a mic drop moment for a school district, I think that was it. At the moment, the order remains in effect. It'll remain in effect until the written order of Judge Cooper is filed, which I suspect will be late tomorrow or early on Wednesday. From that, there will be, I'm sure, an immediate appeal. That's going to trigger an automatic stay of the lower court order. That should be immediately vacated by Judge Cooper. Whether or not it gets subsequently reinstated by the first DC or not, I would doubt it, but we'll see. And there may have to be some further litigation on that point. But I would expect by late tomorrow or early Wednesday, the law of the land in Florida will be that this is unenforceable. It would be unlawful for any of the for the Department of Education to enforce these policies on any school district in the state.
Okay, again, if you'd like to reach out to Attorney Craig Whisenhunt, you can reach out to ripleywisenhunt.com. That's his law office website, and his contact information will be there for you to follow up later on if you want to hire him, consult with him. We are going to wrap up. Thank you for those who have been watching, who will watch. Hopefully this has been informative, and it all starts by the citizenry standing up and saying and challenging the king, the governor, and saying, no, you can't. These are the parameters. These are constitutional limitations you have, and you can't violate them. And good job on you. And for those of your colleagues, other plaintiff lawyers who you all band together in a short period of time, and you did a great job. Thank you so much. It's for doing that on behalf of children and the lives of their parents, the schools. This is the Delta. This is worse than last year. What we're seeing a lot of people become very sick and die. So thank you for what you did. Do you have any final thoughts, points that you'd like to make before we wrap up and say have a great rest of the day?
No, I would just encourage anyone who is still unsure, if you're not convinced yet that vaccines make sense for you or masks make sense for you, I would discourage you from reaching a conclusion from what a lawyer tells you, or what a politician tells you, or something in a tweet or a meme tells you. Talk to your doctor. Overwhelmingly, there's a consensus view. They agree, but your doctor knows for you what's best. Rely on them. They're the best source of information to keep you safe and healthy, and to keep the community safe and healthy. They're our best chance if we listen to them to get through it.
You know what? And that is a great point. And let me ask you this, now that you've mentioned that, and thank you for doing so, because there's a lot of people that are ignorant. And then later on, it's sad to see the stories where they want to get vaccinated right before they're put on a ventilator. It's sad. But Do you think most doctors, have you heard of any stories of any doctors suggesting that you shouldn't take the vaccine? Generally, I mean, there might be
Generally,
some
no.
exceptions. Okay,
So I'm sure there are exceptions. There's,
of course,
there are outliers in every profession.
right.
And there are circumstances, genuinely, there are medical circumstances for some people where it is probably not consistent with sound medical advice for them to be vaccinated. And it's for those people, it's especially important that those who can do so. Um, by and large, the viewpoint on the vaccine is that it is incredibly effective. Where they thought initially that it would create a genuine immunity, um, it doesn't. The way the coronavirus replicates doesn't really provide for that. It does provide a great deal of resistance to it, but it does not truly create immunity, and it does not prevent those who have been vaccinated from spreading it, which is again why masks continue to be so important. The vaccine is not like some invisible body armor that makes you invincible. But what it does do is it gives you a much better chance that if you do contract it, you may not know it. It may be very mild. It is significantly more likely that you'll survive. Um, so it's incredibly important still. I will tell you, the only doctor that I believe has held any kind of public sway on the issue who espouses something to the contrary is Dr. Bhattacharya, who made it
Mm,
very clear that in his mind, it would be perfectly acceptable to protect the most vulnerable of our population, which he believes really is restricted to the elderly, and otherwise let the virus run rampant through the rest of the communities and take out as many as it will, understanding it's not likely to take out that many. Um, and that's his Great Barrington Declaration, which is a disturbing document that really kind of the best I can sum up from it is the moment in Shrek with Lord Farquaad telling his soldiers as they venture out on his quest that some of them may die and it was a risk he was willing to take. Uh, this is an economist who is looking at some actuarial table of and a balance sheet of where the loss of life is worth it. Um, I don't know anybody who believes that that calculus is worth it when it's their family member.
right, for sure. Do you think he's doing it what to reach herd immunity, or for everybody just to be naturally inoculated, like we have their own
Right. So
immunity
so here's
antibodies?
so here's the thing about that. Um, that's really a pipe dream, right? If there was truly a possibility of real herd immunity to corona style viruses, the common cold should have died out a long time ago. The
Right.
problem is these coronaviruses evolve so quickly through their replication process that by the time it circles back to you, it's sufficiently different enough that your built up immunity maybe offers you some resistance, but it's not foolproof. And it's only a matter of time before it evolves enough that you're defenseless again. So this
I
is
know,
going
but
to be
don't you
here.
think that somebody's gonna argue about with your example with the cold virus that a lot of people don't take the flu vaccination every year. They just let
Sure,
their bodies and their immune system fight it off, and they don't
sure.
take the vaccine. They could say that
And
too, and yeah,
they can. And and everybody gets colds, or for the most part. I'm sure there's a few people who've been very fortunate, but but we survive the cold. And it's important to know when we talk about the number of people who are dying from the flu every year, um, we estimate the primary flu strain. That's the way the vaccine works. Is we're taking our educated guess which version of the influenza virus we need to be guarded against. But influenza viruses are not one virus. There's many different influenza strains that circulate amongst the population, and oftentimes what is killing people is not the primary strain. Similarly, there are lots and lots of different forms of cancer that spread through our communities, but they're not all the same
right,
cancer.
that's true.
COVID-19 is one thing. There's not, a whole bunch of different COVID-19s. It's one virus, and it's going through different variant forms, but it's still at its core the same disease, and it's killing more people than the flu does, and it's killing
For
as many
sure,
sometimes as heart disease and cancer does. And those are the combination of totals of dozens or hundreds of diseases, and compared to one thing. So it's kind of like going, you know what, New York's a really big city. but it doesn't have as many people as Asia. Well, you're comparing two vastly different scenarios there. So it's
Craig, last year even in March of 2020, I said this is not just like the flu. It's not. And some people believe that. And, you can maybe excuse last year, but now at this point where we're at, if you continue to believe that this is just like the flu,
one of the scariest thing, I think the scariest thing for this, and this is coming from obviously the opinion of a constitutional lawyer. I am not in any measure a medical doctor, but for me personally, the thing that I find most troubling and concerning is we don't know why from one person to the next it's so different.
right,
That this week we saw a local police officer uh, passed away. The spouse of one of the judicial assistants passed away. In the middle of our trial, a third grader passed away, all from COVID. And the people around them, who they clearly must have, gotten contact from, were largely okay. And we don't know from person A to person B. Person A never has a symptom, and person B dies. We don't know the distinguishing characteristic, whatever the genetic marker is, or bad roll of the dice. It causes some people to have such a devastating reaction. But if there's anything we can do to spare anyone else that grief and loss, it is hard to find any moral justification not to, when it
right.
is as simple as the truly mild inconvenience of wearing a mask.
And we not only you referenced the St. Pete officer that died, there was a Polk law enforcement that died, also a manatee, and also a circuit judge from Volusia, 49 years old, left 6 kids, a wife that died. For those of you who are watching, we have Jan Barrow. Just when I wanted to wrap this up, you're very interesting guest, Craig, and the information that you're giving is incredible, and a lot of people want to know. Who would you recommend in Polk County to represent a group of parents who are considering stronger action to get the board to implement a mask mandate? And I believe Polk's numbers are pretty high when I've been like following up on their numbers.
Well, right now, everywhere in Florida is very high. As to a specific individual in Polk County, I don't know who I would recommend for you. But certainly, if there's anything that our firm could do to help, or if you want the names and contact information for the other attorneys involved, feel free to reach out. And if we can find someone to help you, we certainly will. Um, I'm more than happy. I mean, we certainly were able to walk Judge Cooper through the science on this. I'm happy to try and help walk any of the school boards through it. I think if you get down to what the studies really say, it becomes very challenging to find fault with the idea that masks work where they're needed. But again, not every school, even within a district, may have that need, and
So
we need to respect that fact.
Polk, as of the reporting period of August 20th to August 26th, the new positivity rate is 23.2%
Right?
in Polk.
Which also begs the question why their courts are open, right? Because our phases of reopening, if you went back up above a threshold, we were supposed to start, you know, going back to phase 2 and phase 1. Same is true in Pinellas and Pasco and
Right.
Hillsborough. But so at some point, that's going to have to be the next litigated issue. Perhaps the next windmill to be tilted at is, we set out rules about how we were going to conduct court operations. We're not necessarily adhering to them, it seems.
Yeah. Okay. And now that you keep mentioning the importance of masks, I just wanted to share this real quickly for the viewers, for all of us to look to this as a source, because Judge Cooper said it was the gold standard for him, the CDC.
Right. Well, I think it's also, you got to remember, the CDC is who we rely upon in Florida for so many other things, um, and they're renowned the world over. But if you're not convinced, talk to your personal physician. Chances are they followed the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC guidelines, because it's hard to find reputable doctors who think differently from that, given the wealth of resources and data-driven assessments done by the CDC. But you don't have to take a lawyer or a politician or a pundit, or a meme or a tweet's, view of it. go talk to a doctor who has your genuine health at heart and is their primary interest, and see what they tell you. But you would be hard pressed to find a medical professional anywhere who's going to discourage you from doing the things to keep you safe. For the same reason, it'd be hard pressed to find a doctor who's going to tell you not to wash your hands. And when you wash your hands, not to use soap. Some of this is just common sense.
So cdc.gov. And when you've been fully vaccinated, choosing safer activities. If you are not fully vaccinated and age 2 or older, you should wear a mask in indoor public places. In general, you do not need to wear a mask in outdoor settings. In areas with high numbers of COVID-19 cases, consider wearing a mask in crowded outdoor settings and for activities with close contact with others who are not fully vaccinated. People who have a condition or are taking medications that weaken their immune system may not be fully protected even if they are fully vaccinated. They should continue to take all precautions recommended for unvaccinated people, including wearing a well-fitted mask until advised otherwise by their healthcare provider. If you are fully vaccinated, to maximize protection from the Delta variant and prevent possibly spreading it to others, wear a mask indoors in public if you are in an area of substantial or high transmission. If you are fully vaccinated, see when you've been fully vaccinated. So I would encourage everyone to, as you said, not the pundits, not people on social media arguing with each other, but yeah, with a healthcare provider, somebody in the medical field. And I would maybe get two opinions if you want to absolutely be sure. Okay, well, we have gone on for 40 minutes, Craig, and it was awesome having you on again. Kudos to you and to all your colleagues, the ones that you've mentioned. Amazing. So some of the ones that you mentioned that I personally know, amazing attorneys, amazing individuals. Again, thank you for coming on. I hope you come back again. There's an issue there that I put out on my social media during the weekend as to the issue. And I know this is not the topic that we agreed to discuss today, but it's something that I'm maybe interested in having a conversation about during a broadcast, whether the government should mandate vaccinations.
Right. So, and I'm happy to come back. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun. And I appreciate all the questions. And if anybody else has follow-up, or if they think of one when the broadcast is over, they're more than welcome to come hit us up at ripleywisenhunt.com. They can message us to our Facebook account or give us a call.
All right. Thank you. Haiti Oropesa with Florida You Judge. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Until next time, have a great rest of the day. Thank you.